1885. The Arizona Territory was a place that tested a soul, and Red Mesa was the anvil. The high desert air was thin and sharp, carrying the taste of alkali dust and the distant, bitter perfume of gunpowder. It was a land of harsh sun that bleached bone and wood to the same shade of gray. The wind, when it blew, did not sigh. It hissed, carrying the scent of horse leather and dry scrub. This was a place where a man's life was worth the speed of his draw, and a woman's worth was measured in the acres she might bring to a marriage. Heart's Hollow was set deep in this anvil, a crease in the rock that caught what little water fell. It was a scratch of green in a world of red and brown. So, Evelyn Hart, at 26, was the sole inheritor of this burden, her father, a man who had known this land as he knew his own hands, had vanished 2 months prior. He had ridden out to check the North Range after a summer storm and had not returned. The territory swallowed men whole. It was a known, brutal fact. His disappearance left a gaping hole in the world, a hole that Evelyn now had to stand in. She was the rancher, the boss, the target. She wore her father's old denim trousers, her hair tied back in a harsh knot. She was strong, built of the same unyielding material as the land itself. But the solitude of Heart's Hollow was beginning to wear her down. Every creak of the porch in the night, every distant coyote howl, sounded like a threat. The silence of the house was louder than any gunshot. Cain Blackhorse knew this land differently. He knew it as a hunter, and as the hunted, he was a man split down the middle by blood. His father had been a white trapper, his mother an Apache woman. He belonged to neither world. The army had used him for his tracking skills, dressed him in cavalry blue, and pointed him at his mother's people. Then, when the wars quieted and his usefulness faded, they had cast him aside. He was an exile, a ghost living on the fringes, wrangling wild mustangs for a few dollars. He moved like a shadow, his skin the color of the red rock, his eyes holding the flat, patient look of a man who expects nothing good from the world. He preferred the company of horses. They were honest in their fear and their loyalty. Men were not. A new shadow was moving across Red Mesa, and it had a name, Luke Ransom. Ransom was a man who saw the desert not as a home, but as a vault to be emptied. He ran thousands of head of cattle, but it was said he was truly mining the land, buying politicians in Tucson, and collecting sheriffs like stray calves. The whispers in the small, dusty town of Red Mesa spoke of pressure, of ranchers finding their wells poisoned or their fences mysteriously cut. Ransom was buying up the territory, piece by bloody piece, and he was using rumor and fear as his currency. His hungry gaze had settled firmly on Heart's Hollow. The word, whispered over warm beer, was copper, a rich vein of it running right under Evelyn's dry pasture. Ransom wanted it, and he was not a man who took no for an answer. The sun bled out behind the western cliffs, painting the sky in the shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was an evening in late October, the air holding the first sharp promise of cold. Evelyn Hart was securing the ranch for the night, her father's heavy shotgun resting in the crook of her arm. The quiet was wrong. It was not the usual peace of dusk. It was a heavy, listening quiet. She saw the tracks then, near the barn. They were fresh, a single horse, shod, favoring its left foreleg. But it was the trail of dark drips beside the hoofprints that made her stomach tighten into a cold knot. She moved to the barn door, easing it open just enough to slip inside. The familiar smell of hay and animal warmth met her. But it was tainted. There was a new smell, iron and salt, blood. She found him in the shadows of the hayloft ladder. He was slumped, half-conscious, against a bale of straw. It was Cain Blackhorse, though she only knew him by reputation. He was trying to hold his left arm together with his right hand. Blood soaked his rough spun shirt and dripped steadily onto the dry hay. He looked up as her shadow fell over him. His face was a mask of tight, controlled pain, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He did not beg. He did not plead. He just watched her. "Who are you?" she whispered. her voice barely audible. The shotgun felt impossibly heavy in her hands. "A problem," he rasped. His voice was rough gravel. He coughed, a dry, painful sound. "They'll be looking for me." "Who?" "Ransom's men." That name hit her like a physical blow. Ransom. The man who was squeezing the life from her home. Fear told her to back away, to run to the house, lock the door, and pretend she had seen nothing. Ransom's hired guns were not known for their mercy. If they found this man here, they would not leave her to tell the tale. They would burn the barn, the house, and her with it. But then the man groaned, a low sound of pure agony that cut through her fear. He was just a man, wounded, bleeding to death in her barn. She heard it then. Horses. Not close, but coming. The steady, fast drum of riders moving with purpose. "Get up!" she hissed. The decision made for her by the sound, "Can you walk?" "I can try," Kane said. He put his good hand on the stall and pushed himself upward. He staggered, his breath catching in a pained whistle, and he nearly fell. Evelyn moved. It was a fast, reckless decision, the kind her father would have warned her against. "In the cellar," she said, nodding to the floor. Not the root cellar by the house, but the old, hidden one under the barn floor, where her father used to store emergency supplies and winter seed. She hauled the heavy oak planks aside, revealing a square of blackness. The smell of damp earth and cured potatoes rose up. "Get in! Be quiet! Do not make a sound, or we are both dead!" He did not argue. He half fell into the hole, landing heavily. She covered it, sliding the planks back, and kicked straw over the seams just as the riders pounded into the yard, their horses snorting and stamping. "Miss Hart," a voice called out. It was an oily, falsely pleasant voice she recognized. She stepped out of the barn, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure they could hear it. She forced her hands not to shake on the shotgun. 3 men sat on their horses, silhouetted against the dying light. She recognized the leader, a man named Silas, who wore a dusty bowler hat and a smug expression. "Silas," she said, her voice flat and cold. "A pleasant evening," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "We're tracking a horse thief, half-breed fella. Seen him pass this way, he was bleeding. Left a trail." "I have seen no one," Evelyn said. She hated that her voice was a little too high, a little too thin. Silas smiled. It was not a nice smile. He looked past her, at the dark opening of the barn. "Mind if we look? He cannot have gone far." "I mind," she said. She did not raise the shotgun, but she shifted its weight. "This is my property. You are not welcome here." Silas stared at her for a long, silent moment. He looked at her, then at the small, lonely house, then back to the barn. He was calculating, weighing the trouble of forcing his way past her against the trouble of explaining it to Ransom later. Finally, he seemed to decide it was not worth it. "Maybe another time, Miss Hart," he said, his voice still smooth. He tipped his hat and wheeled his horse, his men following. "He cannot have gone far. We will find him." She watched them ride away, their forms shrinking into the twilight. She stood there, frozen, until the sound of their horses faded completely. Her entire body was shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. Only when the night was silent again, filled only with the sound of the wind. Did she go back into the dark barn? She slid the planks back. Kane was breathing heavily in the darkness below, the small space concentrating the smell of his blood. She did not help him out. She could not. She just sank onto a nearby bale of hay, the shotgun falling into her lap. The adrenaline drained away, leaving her hollow and cold. The full, crushing weight of her situation crashed down on her. Her father was gone. The ranch was failing. Luke Ransom was circling like a vulture, and she had just lied to his hired guns to protect a bleeding stranger. An outlaw. She put her head in her hands, and a sound tore out of her. It was not a sob, not a wail. It was a soft cry, a sound of absolute, bone-deep loneliness and terror. It was the sound of a woman holding an entire world up with her bare hands. Feeling the weight begin to crack her, she heard him move, a painful shuffle in the hay, a grunt of effort. Cain Blackhorse had pulled himself out of the hole. He stood before her, swaying on his feet, his face pale and slick with sweat in the thin moonlight that filtered through the cracks in the barn roof. The air in the barn was thick. It smelled of dry hay, of old leather, of his sweat, and the sharp, metallic tang of his blood. Her own breath was coming in ragged, hitched gasps. They were two wounded animals, trapped in the same small, dark space. He looked at her. He saw the tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. He saw the shotgun. He saw the way her small, strong frame trembled. He should have left. He should have taken a horse and run. It was his way. Never get involved. Never trust. But her soft cry, it was a sound he knew. It was the sound of the world ending, quietly, in a dark place. It was a sound he recognized from his own soul. He did not speak. He took one painful step. He reached out with his good right hand, his left arm held tight and useless against his chest. He did not touch her face. He did not touch her shoulder. He laid his hand over hers, where it gripped the wooden stock of the shotgun. His hand was rough, covered in calluses and old scars. It was surprisingly warm. Evelyn went rigid. Her crying stopped instantly, caught in her throat. She stared at his hand on top of hers. It was a simple gesture. It was an anchor in the storm that was her life. In that moment, he was not a half-breed, not a horse thief, not a problem. He was just a man, wounded and hunted, offering the only thing he had. He was risking capture, risking bleeding out on her floor, just to offer that touch. And she, the rancher, alone in the barn, accepted it. The first true connection was forged in the dust and the moonlight, a silent, desperate pact. His hand was gone as quickly as it had come. Evelyn snatched her own back, the rough warmth of his skin lingering like a brand. The connection broke, and the cold reality of the barn rushed back in. He was a wounded man, an outlaw, and she had just defied Luke Ransom's men for him. "You cannot stay here," she said, her voice a low, unsteady whisper. "I know," Cain Blackhorse breathed. He tried to push himself fully upright, and a wave of dizziness sent him stumbling against the stall. His face was gray. "You are bleeding. A lot." She was a rancher's daughter. She knew blood. This was too much. "They shot you." "A graze," he lied, his teeth gritted. "It is not a graze," she countered, her practical nature taking over the fear. "It went through." He did not deny it again. She made another choice, one that felt even more foolish than the first. "Can you make it to the house? My father, he had a room, in the back, small." It took them what felt like an hour. He leaned on her, a solid, heavy weight. Every step was a fresh agony for him. She could feel the heat coming off him, the fever already starting to take hold. She got him inside, unseen, into a small, cot-sized room off the kitchen that had once been for a hired hand who never stayed. He collapsed onto the thin mattress, his breath coming in ragged, shallow pants. She lit a single lamp, the low, oily light throwing deep shadows across his face. She brought water, her father's old medical kit mostly filled with horse liniment and branding sutures and a bottle of whiskey. "This will hurt," she said, cutting his shirt away. The wound was ugly. A bullet had punched clean through the muscle of his upper arm, missing the bone by a miracle. It was bleeding sluggishly, but the entry and exit wounds were raw, torn flesh. He watched her, his dark eyes never leaving her face as she cleaned it. She was clumsy, her hands shaking, but she was thorough. "You need a doctor," she said. "No," he said, a single word, absolute. No, doctor. They report ransom pays them. She knew he was right. She took the curved needle, thick gut, and doused them in whiskey. Drink, she ordered, holding the bottle to his lips. He took a long, shuddering pull, the liquor making his eyes water, but he did not cough. He lay back and stared at the ceiling. Do it! She stitched him. It was awful. Brutal work. His skin was tough, and she had to pull the needle through with a pair of pliers. He did not make a sound, not a whimper, not a curse. He just lay there, his entire body rigid. A line of sweat beaded on his upper lip. When she was done, she bandaged it tightly with clean rags. Thank you, he whispered. And then his eyes rolled back, and the fever took him. For 2 days, he was lost. He drifted, muttering in a language she did not understand. Harsh, guttural sounds, broken by soft, pleading words. Apache. She stayed by him when she could, forcing water between his cracked lips, pressing cool, damp cloths to his forehead. She was terrified. She was harboring a fugitive, a man who might die in her father's cot. But a strange, fierce protectiveness had taken root. He was her secret, her responsibility. On the 3rd morning, the fever broke. She found him awake, his eyes clear and sharp, watching her. You stayed, he said. I did not have much choice, she lied. He was a quiet presence in the house, a ghost. He ate what she brought, his appetite small. He never complained. He just watched, and as he began to heal, he began to move. A week after the shooting, Silas returned. Evelyn saw his horse from the kitchen window, and her stomach turned to ice. Cain was on his feet, stronger now. He had heard the horse too. He moved to the window of his small room, standing back in the shadows where he could see the porch but not be seen. Silas did not dismount this time. He sat on his big bay horse, looking down at her. Miss Hart, a beautiful morning. What do you want? Silas. Mr. Ransom is a generous man, Silas said, his smile as thin as a knife's edge. He is worried about you, a woman, all alone. It is not safe. These are hard times. We hear you might be having trouble with your taxes. My taxes are paid, she said. Perhaps. Silas shrugged. But paperwork gets lost, and there is the matter of security. Mr. Ransom is prepared to offer you $500 for this land, a generous sum, considering its condition. He sees it as providing protection for you. Protection from what from him? The smile widened. Now, that is no way to talk. He just wants to help. He knows your father is gone. He wants to save you the burden. He knows there is copper under this land. He is not a fool. Neither am I, Evelyn said, her hands balled into fists at her sides. This ranch is not for sale. It was my father's, and it is mine. Now get off my land. Silas stared at her, the smile gone. Mr. Ransom gets what he wants. Miss Hart, one way or another, think on it. He will not ask so politely next time. He turned his horse and rode away. Not fast, but with the lazy confidence of a man who knows he has already won. Evelyn walked back inside, her knees shaking. She leaned against the door, closing her eyes. She did not know Cain was watching her until he spoke, his voice low from the doorway of his room. He will be back. I know. You are not safe here. This is my home, she said, a flash of her father's stubbornness in her voice. I am not running. He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin, and retreated to his room. The next morning, she found the top rail of the corral fence, the one that had been split for a month, mended. It was braced with new wood, bound tight with wire. She had not seen him do it. The night after, the sticking door on the woodshed was rehung, its hinges oiled and silent. He worked in the dark, like a phantom, repaying his debt in wood and wire. He was making her home stronger, tightening its defenses. He found her a few days later, just after dusk. She was practicing with her father's shotgun, firing at empty bottles on a fence post. She was clumsy, her body tense, and the kick of the gun nearly knocked her off her feet. She missed every shot. "You hold it too tight," his voice came from the shadows by the porch. He stepped into the fading light. "You will bruise your shoulder and miss." She flinched, angry at being watched, embarrassed at her failure. "I am doing fine." "No," he said. He walked toward her. He was still favoring his arm, but he moved with a fluid grace she had only seen in coyotes. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, smell the faint, clean scent of lye soap and leather. "Your feet," he said. "Spread them, one in front." She did, her body rigid. "Lower, bend your knees. You are fighting it. Let the gun be part of you." He put his good hand on her right arm, his fingers brushing the side of her breast as he settled her grip. A jolt, sharp and sudden, went through her. It was not a gentle touch. It was precise, authoritative. "Here," he said. His other hand, the wounded one, gently touched her shoulder, showing her where to set the stock. "Tuck it in, tight. Let your body take the kick." His voice was a low murmur in her ear. His presence was overwhelming. She was afraid of him, of this closeness, but she was also drawn to it, to the simple, solid strength of him. It was a terrifying, confusing mix that made her breath catch. "Breathe out," he commanded, his hand still on her arm. "Squeeze the trigger. Do not pull it." She focused. She breathed out. She squeezed. The gun exploded, the kick jolting her, but she held her stance. The bottle on the fence post vanished in a spray of glass. She stared, stunned. "Again," he said, stepping back. The next week, she went to town for supplies. It was the first time she had left the ranch since the shooting. The air in Red Mesa was different. Mr. Hatcher at the general store, who had given her candy as a child, was polite, but his eyes were cold. He counted her change and pushed it across the counter without a word. Mrs. Gable, her neighbor, saw her coming and crossed the street, her face tight, pretending to look in the window of the closed assay office. The rumor was a poison in the air. "That Hart girl, reckless, taking in strays. Word is, she is hiding that Apache outlaw, the one Ransom wants." Ransom's work. He was cutting her off, isolating her, making her a pariah. She was truly alone, except for the man in her house. The fire started on a moonless night. She woke to a smell that every rancher dreads, not wood smoke, but the acrid, sickening smell of burning hay, and something else, the high, terrified screaming of her horses. She threw on her boots and ran, the barn, her father's barn. It was already an inferno, flames leaping 50 feet into the black sky, turning the night to a hellish orange. Kane was already there. He was dressed in his trousers, his chest bare, a bucket in his good hand, throwing water from the trough onto the flames. It was useless, like spitting on a furnace. "The horses!" she screamed, running toward the corral gate. The animals were mad with terror, rearing and crashing against the fences, their eyes rolling white. A gunshot ripped through the night, the bullet whining past her head and thudding into the water trough. "Down!" Kane roared. He tackled her, throwing his body over hers, pushing her into the dirt as another shot rang out. "They are covering. They want the barn to go. They want us to burn with it." He shoved her shotgun into her hands. "Stay low. Get the animals. I will hold them." She had never seen him move like this. He was not a wounded man. He was a warrior. He grabbed a heavier repeating rifle she had not known he possessed his own. Kept with his saddle, he moved with a swift, deadly purpose, firing into the darkness beyond the firelight. He was not shooting to hit. He was shooting to make them keep their heads down. Evelyn scrambled to the corral gate. "Come on, boys, come on." She unlatched it, slapping the panicked horses on their rumps. driving them out, away from the fire, into the open pasture. They worked in the smoke and the chaos, a desperate, silent team. She freed the horses while he fired, moved, and fired again, a phantom in the flickering light. The heat was scorching, blistering the paint on the house. The roar of the fire was deafening. In 10 minutes, it was over. The horses were out, scattered but safe. The barn roof collapsed in on itself in a geyser of sparks and embers. The riders in the dark, their work done, had melted away. They stood side by side, panting, covered in soot and sweat, the terrible heat washing over their faces. The barn was gone. Everything. Her father's tools, the winter feed, the wagon, all of it, a pile of roaring flame. Cain's chest was heaving. He was streaked with ash, his skin glistening. In the flickering, hellish light, she saw it clearly for the first time. It was not a scar from a knife or a bullet. It was a brand, puckered, deep, and angry. Just over his heart, it was a single, elegant, damning letter, an R. The shotgun in her hands felt cold. "You worked for him," she whispered. The smoke stung her throat. It was not a question. It was a final, sickening realization. He did not look at her. He stared into the fire, his face hard, as if carved from the red rock itself. "I did. You are one of them," she choked out. "You were one of his hired guns." The trust, so carefully built with mended fences and shooting lessons, shattered. He looked down at the scar on his chest, his expression unreadable. "He branded me," he said, his voice flat and dead. "He branded me like a stray steer. He paid me to track. When the army was done, he picked me up, paid me to track rustlers. Then others." She understood. "Your own people." His good hand balled into a fist. "I was good at it. I was a dog he could point. Then he ordered me to track a family. A man, his wife, 2 children. They had refused to leave their land. He wanted them gone. I refused." He finally turned to look at her. His eyes were not angry. They were empty, burned out, like the ruins of her barn. "So he had his men hold me down. Silas held the iron. Ransom watched. And when they were done, he shot me, left me for dead in a dry wash." He looked back at the fire. "I know him, Miss Hart. I know what he does to people who say no." The pieces clicked into place. The man she had saved was the one man in the territory who hated Luke Ransom as much as she did, maybe more. But he was born of that violence. He had worn that brand, done that work. The conflict tore at her. How could she trust a man who had been one of them? How could she not? He did not wait for her to speak. He looked at the smoldering ruins, at the isolated house, at her. "He will not take this from you," Cain said, so quietly she almost did not hear him over the crackle of the flames. "He will not take anything else." The ashes of the barn were still warm, sending up lazy, gray tendrils of smoke into the dawn. The fire had burned itself out, leaving a black, rectangular scar on the land. Evelyn stood looking at it, her body numb with cold and shock. The house was saved, its side blistered and scorched, but it stood. The barn, her father's barn, was gone. Cain Blackhorse was at the water trough, his bare chest streaked with soot, his face a hard mask in the pale light. He was methodically rebandaging his wounded arm with a strip of cloth dipped in water. The brand over his heart, the ugly, puckered R, was stark against his skin. His confession hung in the smoky air between them, as stark and as ugly as the brand itself. He had been one of them. He had been Ransom's man. "You should go," she said, her voice hollow. She did not turn to look at him. "He will send more. They will not stop until this is all gone. He will not stop even if I go," Cain said. His voice was flat. "He knows you are alone. Now he knows you have help. He will not let that stand." What am I supposed to do? She cried, the numbness finally breaking, replaced by a hot surge of despair. He has men. He has the law. He has everything. I have a scorched house and 2 horses. He finished tying the bandage with his teeth and his good hand. You have to leave, he said. This is my home. It is a graveyard, he said, walking toward her. He will bury you in it if you stay. His words were brutal, but they were true. Defeated. She turned away from the ruin and walked back into the house. It smelled of smoke and fear. She had to gather what she could, her father's things. If she was going to run, she would not leave him behind again. She went to his small, neat room. She pulled his old sheepskin-lined coat from a hook on the wall. It was the one he always wore in winter. He had left it behind that last morning, a sign of how warm the day had been. She buried her face in it, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of him tobacco, leather, and dust. It was all she had left. Her fingers, fumbling in her grief, found a stiffness in the inner breast pocket. It was not a tobacco pouch. It was paper, folded thick. She pulled it out. It was a letter, written in her father's heavy, deliberate hand. The pencil pressed hard into the paper. It was not addressed. It began, "To whichever decent man reads this." Her hands trembled as she read. "My name is John Hart. I am a rancher at Hart's Hollow. I write this in fear for my life. Luke Ransom is not just a land grabber. He is a thief, in league with Captain Elias Thorne of the United States Cavalry. Fort Lowell, Thorne is falsifying procurement records, billing the Army for thousands of dollars in feed and horses that do not exist, and splitting the money with Ransom. They are using this money to buy the law and seize the land. They know about the copper. They plan to use Army resources to secure the mine." Evelyn had to sit on the cot. Her head was swimming. "They found out, I know." She read on. "I overheard them at the assay office. Ransom said he would handle the old man. I have the proof. Thorne's ledgers. Ransom's letters. I took them from their meeting place. I have hidden them where no man would look, in the old Apache well, the one the spirits guard. 3 days' ride northeast, the sun's eye. If I am gone, it is because Ransom has killed me. Avenge me. Stop him. The proof is in the well." She read it 3 times. Her father had not vanished. He had been murdered. She walked out of the house, the letter clutched in her hand, and found Cain by the corral, checking the hooves of the 2 remaining horses. "Read this," she said, her voice shaking but hard. He took the letter, his eyes scanning it quickly. His expression did not change, but she saw a muscle tighten in his jaw. He read it once, then a second time. "Sun's eye," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I know this place." "Can you take me there?" "It is not a good place," he said, handing the letter back. "It is on my mother's land. It is haunted, they say." "I do not care about ghosts. Cain, I care about that." She pointed to the smoking ruins. "I care about him." She pointed to the letter. "This changes it. This is not just my ranch. This is murder. It is a conspiracy." He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. He looked at the endless, hostile expanse of the desert around them, and at the thin plume of smoke rising from Red Mesa in the distance. He had been betrayed by the Army. He had been branded by Ransom. Now, this letter tied both his enemies together. "We cannot stay here," he said, his voice final. "They will be back before noon, to see the job is done. Pack food, water, and ammunition. Nothing else. We ride in 10 minutes." They left Hart's Hollow at a hard gallop, heading northeast, the rising sun at their backs. They did not look back. The land changed. The familiar red rock and mesas gave way to a high, dry plain, an endless stretch of gray scrub, yucca, and baked earth. Cain was different here. In the valley, he had been a wounded man, a ghost. Out here, he was alive. He rode slightly ahead of her. his rifle in a scabbard under his leg, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. He seemed to be reading the land itself, noting every broken branch, every puff of dust. He was no longer her patient. He was her guide. After 2 days of hard riding, eating dry biscuits and jerky in the saddle, they saw a shape on the horizon. It was a low, sagging adobe building, shimmering in the heat. La Cuna del Sol, Kane said. The sun's crib. We can get water, maybe information. Is it safe? It is not safe anywhere, he said. But the woman who runs it, she hates ransom. He told her to wait with the horses, hidden in a shallow arroyo. She watched him walk to the cantina, his movements fluid and cautious. He disappeared inside the dark doorway. The cantina smelled of spilled beer, chili, and old dust. It was empty, save for a single woman behind the rough plank bar. She was old, her face a map of deep wrinkles, her black hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight bun. She was polishing a glass with a dirty rag. She looked up as Kane entered, her black eyes sharp and missing nothing. Heard you were dead, Black Horse, she said, her voice like gravel. Not yet, Tia Rosa, Kane replied. He laid 2 coins on the bar. Water, and whatever food you have that will not spoil. She slid the coins back. Your money is no good. You look like hell. She turned and pulled a flask of whiskey, 2 full canteens, and a cloth sack from under the bar. Jerky, dried apples. For the girl, too. Kane's hand did not move from the butt of his pistol. What girl? Tia Rosa laughed, a dry, harsh sound. The whole territory knows. Hee-ho, Ransom has put a price on your head. $500. Dead, and he wants the Hart girl, alive. Kane's blood ran cold. He knew her father, he said, stating a fact. The old woman's face softened for a second. John Hart. He was a good man. Un hombre bueno. Quiet. But he saw too much. He told me. He said he was worried. He said the desert keeps its secrets, and so should men. She pushed the supplies toward him. Ransom has riders everywhere. He has the law in his pocket. Sheriff Dunn. He is a weak man, buys his whiskey here. He talks too much. Thank you, Rosa. Do not thank me, she said, her face hard again. You bring a war to my doorstep, get this done, or get killed. But do it far from here. As Kane stepped back out into the blinding sun, Evelyn saw it. Tacked to the weathered wooden door was a fresh piece of paper, a bounty poster. It was a crude, printed drawing of a man who looked vaguely like Kane. Wanted, it read. Kane Blackhorse, horse thief, murderer, $500. And scrawled at the bottom, in the same pencil as her father's letter, and the Hart woman, alive. We have to go, Kane said, his voice grim, as he loaded the supplies. They were 3 hours out from the cantina when Evelyn saw the rider. A lone man, approaching slowly, a silver star glinting on his vest. Sheriff, she breathed. Kane pulled his rifle from its scabbard. Keep riding, slow. Let him come. The man who rode up to them was in his 50s, with a soft belly and a kind, worried face that did not belong in this landscape. He looked more like a small-town banker than a lawman. He held one hand up, palm out. Miss Hart, he called out, his voice thin in the wind. Evelyn Hart. Thank God. What in blazes are you doing out here and with him? Sheriff Dunn, Evelyn said, stopping her horse. Luke Ransom burned my barn. He tried to kill us. He murdered my father. Sheriff Caleb Dunn visibly flinched. He licked his lips, his eyes darting from Evelyn's desperate, soot-stained face to Kane's cold, steady rifle. Now, Miss Hart, that is a terrible accusation. Mr. Ransom is a respected man, a pillar of this community. I am just here to bring you back to town, for your own safety. and to arrest him." She nodded at Kane. Dunn looked miserable. "There is a bounty. Miss, I am a lawman. I have to uphold—" "He has not done anything," Evelyn said. "He is a wanted man, and you are with him. People are saying you are an accomplice." "You ride with us, Sheriff," Kane's voice cut in, low and deadly. "Or you ride away. But you are not taking us back to ransom." Dunn looked at Kane, really looked at him. He saw the wounded arm, but he also saw the rifle, held steady by a man who knew how to use it. He was not a killer. He was a man who liked a quiet life, a steady paycheck from the county, and the extra gold eagle ransom slipped him every month. This was not quiet. I cannot just let you go," Dunn stammered, his hand hovering near his pistol. "Then try and stop us," Evelyn said, her voice cold. The challenge hung in the air. Dunn looked at her, at the daughter of the man he had liked, the man he had failed. He looked at the hard, empty desert. He let out a long breath and spat in the dust. "Damn it, girl," he said, his voice full of defeat. "You are riding to your own funeral, both of you." He pulled his hand away from his gun. "I did not see you. I did not see either of you today. But I will again. And next time I will have a posse. Do not make me do that." He wrenched his horse's head around and kicked it, galloping back the way he had come. A lonely, compromised figure shrinking against the horizon. They rode until dusk, the sheriff's warning pushing them on. They made a cold camp, no fire, in a jumble of black volcanic rock. The temperature dropped as soon as the sun vanished, and the cold was sharp, seeping into their bones. The silence of the high desert was absolute, broken only by the wind. Evelyn was tending to Kane's arm. The wound was inflamed, the stitches pulling tight. She cleaned it with the last of the whiskey from Tia Rosa's flask, her touch now practiced and gentle. His skin was hot. Her fingers brushed against the R brand. "This is not your only scar," she said, her voice barely a whisper in the vast dark. His whole body tensed. She had seen them when he was fighting the fire. His chest and back were a landscape of old violence, a long, puckered line along his ribs, a star-shaped scar on his left shoulder. He did not answer. He just stared out into the darkness. She waited, the silence stretching. "The army," he said finally, his voice a dead monotone, as if speaking of another man. "I was a scout, a good one. They said we were just moving them. A small band of Chiricahua, women, children, a few old men, moving them to the reservation." He stopped, the memory choking him. "What happened?" Evelyn whispered, her hands still. "They lied," he said, his voice cracking. "Just once. It was not a relocation. It was an order. From Fort Lowell. The officer, Captain Thorne. He said they were hostiles. We found them at dawn, in a canyon. They were sleeping. They had children, so many children." He closed his eyes. "I tried. I fired a warning shot, to wake them, to make them run." He touched the star-shaped scar on his shoulder. "My own officer shot me, called me a traitor. He left me for dead. And the others. The soldiers," he whispered. "They killed them all. They did not stop. That is what the blue uniform meant to me. That is what I was, a dog, pointing to children. That is the man you are sitting with." She understood. The brand was Ransom's betrayal. The other scars, they were his own soul. She did not say the easy, empty words. She did not say it was not his fault. She knew he would not believe it. Instead, she finished bandaging his arm, her touch deliberate and firm. She tied it off. "You are not that man anymore," she said. The cold was bitter now. They had one blanket between them. "We have to share," she said, her voice practical, as if she were talking about dividing grain. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. He lay down, and she lay beside him, her back to his, both of them fully clothed. He pulled the single rough blanket over them. It was not sexual. It was far more intimate. It was survival. The solid, living warmth of his body against her back was the only real thing in a world of ghosts and murderers. She could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart through his back, a rhythm in the huge, cold dark. After a long, strained hour, she felt the rigid muscles in his back relax, just slightly, and she, in turn, let herself fall into a fitful, exhausted sleep, feeling, for the first time in months, not entirely alone. They woke before dawn, stiff and frozen, the intimacy of the night evaporating in the harsh gray light, as they saddled the horses, their breath pluming in the air. She looked at him. "Cain," she said, "this letter, my father, it is not just my ranch anymore." He nodded, checking his rifle, his face grim. "I know. If we get through this," she said, the words hard to find. "Will you help me, not just run? Will you help me see justice done for him?" He stopped. He was a man who ran. It was how he had survived. But he thought of the fire, of her soft cry in the barn. He thought of the children in the canyon, and the name on the letter, Captain Thorne. "If we live," he said, his voice rough, "we will see it done." He offered his good hand to help her mount. She took it. His grip was strong, and it pulled her up into the saddle. They rode north toward the sun's eye, as the sky began to bleed with the first light of a new, dangerous day. They rode for another full day, deeper into the desolate, broken land that had once belonged to his mother's people. The air grew thinner, the silence heavier. This was a place that did not welcome humans. The rocks were sharp, like broken teeth, and the wind was a constant, high-pitched whine. Cain did not speak, but he rode with a certainty that calmed her. He was not just tracking, he was returning. Late in the afternoon, he stopped, holding up his good hand. "We walk from here." "What is it?" Evelyn whispered, her voice immediately swallowed by the wind. "The sun's eye," he said. "It is not a well, not as white men build them. It is a spirit place. We do not ride horses to it." They tied the horses in a jumble of black rock and proceeded on foot. Cain moved slowly, his wounded arm held stiffly at his side. He led her not to a hole in the ground, but to a deep, narrow fissure in a high rock face, almost invisible until they were upon it. "My father's letter," she breathed. "He said it was a well." "It is, of a kind," Cain said. "It catches the rain, deep down. It is the only water for 20 miles. He slipped into the crack. Evelyn followed, her heart pounding. The world went from blinding sun to cool, damp shadow. The fissure opened up after a few yards, becoming a small, circular cavern open to the sky through a perfect round hole high above. A single beam of late afternoon sun shot through it, illuminating the darkness. It looked exactly like an eye. At the bottom, in the shadows, was a pool of still, dark water, and half submerged in it was a heavy iron chest. "He was here," Evelyn whispered, tears springing to her eyes. She ran to it, her hands touching the cold, rusted metal. "He put it here." The box was heavy, built of thick iron plates and banded with steel. It was not just closed, it was padlocked, a heavy, brass lock green with verdigris. "It is sealed," she said, her voice breaking with frustration. "We can break it," Cain said. He looked around the small cavern, his eyes scanning for a tool, a heavy rock. That was when the first shot rang out. The bullet screamed off the rock wall above their heads, sending stone chips raining down. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "Ransom," Cain roared. He grabbed her, shoving her behind the meager cover of the strongbox as a second and third shot echoed from the fissure entrance. They followed us. How? She cried, crouching in the mud. Done, or Tia Rosa, or they just tracked us. It does not matter. He pulled his pistol, his face a mask of grim fury. He was trapped, his wounded arm, his rifle on his horse. Stay here. Do not move. They have us pinned. No, he said, his eyes on the pool of water. There is another way. The well. It goes deeper. What? It is how the water gets in. An old lava tube. It leads out to the cliffs. He fired one shot back toward the entrance. The sound thunderous. Go! Into the water. Crawl. I will follow. He grabbed the iron box, hissing as the movement pulled at his wounded arm. It is heavy. Too heavy. Leave it! Evelyn screamed. Another bullet whined past, striking sparks near her head. No, he grunted, the promise to her driving him. Your father died for this. We are not leaving it. He pushed it, sliding it into the deeper water. Go. She plunged into the icy pool, the shock of the cold taking her breath. She found the opening, a black, submerged hole just big in diameter for a person. She took a breath and forced herself into the tunnel. Kane followed, dragging the iron box, the scrape of metal on stone agonizingly loud. They emerged, gasping and soaked, in a narrow, dry cavern. They could hear the men's shouts from the sun's eye, angry and confused. This way, Kane said, his voice ragged. He picked up the heavy box with his good arm, cradling it against his chest, his face pale with the strain. They ran, stumbling through the darkness, following a faint glimmer of light. They burst out onto a high, narrow ledge, the wind tearing at their wet clothes. Their horses were below, 50 yards away, hidden in the rocks. But so were Ransom's men. 3 of them, dismounted, making their way up the rocks toward the fissure. They have cut us off from the horses, Evelyn said, panic rising. Not yet. Kane looked around, his gaze frantic. He saw it, a narrow game trail, barely a foothold, leading down the cliff face. There, move! They scrambled, half sliding, down the treacherous path. They reached the horses just as the men above spotted them. A shot cracked out, kicking up dust by Evelyn's feet. Kane threw the heavy box into his saddlebag, the horse rearing in fright. He shoved Evelyn toward her own mount. Ride, do not stop for me. Ride east. He unslung his rifle and, with his one good arm, levered a shell into the chamber. He rested the barrel on a rock and fired back, giving her cover. Evil! He began to shout, but the word was cut off by a grunt of pain. She looked back. He had stumbled, his hand clapped to his side. Kane. I am fine, he yelled, firing again. It is a graze. Go, I am right behind you. She dug her heels in, her horse leaping forward. She did not look back again. She rode, bending low, the wind screaming in her ears, the sound of gunshots echoing behind her. She pushed her horse harder than she ever had, through a maze of canyons and dry washes, the animal's breath sawing in the dusty air. She did not know how long she rode, an hour, 2. The sun was setting, plunging the canyons into deep, purple shadow. She finally slowed, her horse lathered and trembling, and realized she was alone. He was not behind her. Kane, she called out, her voice small and lost. Kane. Only the wind answered. She turned her horse, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She had to go back. He was wounded. He had the proof. She could not lose him. She rode back, slower this time, tracking her own path. She found him in the twilight. He was slumped over his horse's neck, the reins loose in his hand, the rifle still clutched in his good arm. His horse was standing, patiently, in the shadow of a high cliff. They stopped following, he whispered as she rode up. His face was ashen. Too dark. Knew the land. Better. "You are hurt," she said, seeing the dark, spreading stain on his shirt, just above his belt. "A scratch," he breathed, and then he pitched sideways, falling from the saddle. She leaped down, catching him, easing his fall. He was heavier than she expected. A dead weight. She dragged him, her heels digging into the sand, pulling him away from the open ground. Into the darkest shadow she could find a shallow cave, little more than a hollow in the rock. She pulled him into the darkness. Their horses stood outside, exhausted, their heads hanging. There was no sound but his harsh, shallow breathing and the rising shriek of the night wind. They were hidden. They were safe. For now. "Cain," she whispered, shaking him. He did not respond. She could not light a fire. The men could be anywhere. She sat in the absolute, pitch-black cold, his head in her lap. She tore a strip from her petticoat, fumbling in the dark to find his wound. It was not a scratch. The bullet had torn a long, shallow groove across his side, through the muscle. It was bleeding badly. It was his third wound. His body could not take much more. She pressed the cloth hard against it, her entire body shaking. "You cannot die," she whispered into the dark. You promised me justice." He groaned, a low, animal sound. She fumbled for the canteen, wetting the rag, trying to clean the wound, her fingers sticky with his blood. Her touch was clumsy, shaking. "Cold," he mumbled, his body starting to shiver. I know," she said, her own teeth chattering. She pulled her saddle blanket from her horse and wrapped it around him, then huddled close, trying to give him her own body heat. She held him like that for hours. The cave was silent, save for their breathing, his breath, her breath, mingling in the cold air. She could smell the dust on his skin, the gunpowder on his clothes, the iron of his blood. Her face was inches from his. She could feel his breath, ragged and warm, on her cheek. Her heart was pounding, a frantic drum against her ribs. She was terrified of the men outside, of the dark, of the wound under her hands. But there was something else, a different, sharper fear that was pulling every nerve in her body tight. He shifted, his eyes opening, in the faint starlight that filtered into the cave. She could just make out his face. He was looking at her, not as a nurse, not as a rancher. He was looking at her as a man. "Evelyn," he breathed. "I am here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are safe. You came back for me." "I did," she said, her throat tight. His good hand, the right one, came up. It was slow, hesitant. His rough fingers, calloused and stained, brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was electric, a jolt that went straight through her. She flinched, but did not pull away. "You should not have," he whispered. "You should have run." "I could not," she said. He did not let her finish. His hand moved from her hair to the back of her neck, his fingers gripping her. He pulled her down. His mouth found hers in the dark. It was not a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. It was desperate and rough and full of all the terror and violence of the day. His lips were dry, tasting of dust and gunpowder and blood. He kissed her like a man starving, like a man drowning, taking her breath into his own lungs. Evelyn's mind went silent. There were no thoughts of ransom, no thoughts of her father, no thoughts of fear. There was only this, the shock of his mouth, the strength of his hand in her hair, the solid, warm reality of him in her arms. She was afraid. She had never been touched like this, never been wanted like this. But beneath the fear was a powerful, surging wave of need. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of being alone. She kissed him back. Her hands, which had been pressing on his wound, moved up, one gripping his shoulder, the other sliding into his hair. She held on to him, anchoring herself against the chaos. She met his hunger with her own, a raw, unspoken desperation that had been building since the night she found him in her barn. The kiss broke, but they did not move. They stayed, their foreheads touching, their breath coming in short, harsh gasps. The air in the shallow cave was thick with what had just passed between them, a fragile, dangerous new thing. "Cain," she whispered, her voice unsteady. He said nothing, just breathed her in. He had risked everything for this, for her touch, and now he had it. She felt the admission, the acknowledgement, pass between them in the darkness. They were two broken, hunted things, hiding in a hole in the rock. And they were no longer alone, but the enemy was still out there. The night was still cold, and he was still bleeding. "We have to stop the bleeding," she said, her voice soft now, full of a strange, new tenderness. "I know," he breathed. They stayed like that until the first pale hint of gray light touched the sky. They were both exhausted, emotionally raw, and freezing. The night had passed without the return of Ransom's men. As the light grew, they looked at each other, really looked at each other. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes dark and tired, but alive. She knew her own face was a mirror of his. "The box," he said, his voice rough. They dragged it from his saddlebag. The lock was heavy, but the iron was old. Cain took a rock and, with a few powerful blows from his good arm, he smashed the hinge. The lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of papers, a thick ledger book, and a hand-drawn map. Evelyn's hands shook as she unrolled it. It was a detailed survey of her land, of Hart's Hollow and the surrounding mesas, and marked on it, in her father's own hand, was a thick, shaded area labeled Copper Vein Rich. She looked at the ledger. It was not her father's. The handwriting was neat, precise. It was a list of dates and names and amounts. Captain E., Thorne, $1,000. Sheriff C., Dunn, $200. Assay office payment for silence, $500. It was all there. The proof. "He did it," she whispered. "My father, he got it." Cain was looking at the ledger, his jaw tight. "Captain Elias Thorne, the man from the canyon. He and Ransom, they own the territory." He stood up, his body stiff, his wound dark and crusty in the morning light. "I am taking this to Tucson," he said. Evelyn's heart dropped. "What now?" "To Fort Lowell," he said. "Thorne is a captain, but he is not the general. There are men above him. I know one, Major Croft. He hated Thorne. He might be an honest man." "You cannot," she said, grabbing his arm. "You are wounded. They will be looking for you. It is a suicide mission. It is the only way." "Evelyn," he said, his voice firm. He put his hand on her, his touch now gentle, caressing her cheek. "I can move fast alone. I know the Army's ways. I can get in." "And what about me?" she asked, her voice small. She hated how weak she sounded. She had just found him. She could not lose him. "You will ride south," he said. "Go to Tia Rosa's. She will hide you. It is the last place they will look, now that they know she helped us. Wait for me there." "Wait for you?" she said, the words choking her. "Or wait to hear that you have been caught and hanged." "I will come back," he said. His eyes were intense, holding hers. "I promise you. I promised you justice. We will see it done." He wrapped the precious papers, put them inside his shirt, against his skin, and pulled the heavy iron box from the cave, hiding it under a pile of loose rock. He kissed her once more. It was not like the night before. It was not desperate. It was a promise, quick, hard, and final. "Go," he said. "Do not look back." He mounted his horse, his movement stiff with pain, and turned his horse north, toward Tucson. Evelyn watched him go. a lone, battered figure against the vast, empty desert, carrying her only hope with him. She felt her heart tear, afraid that she had just watched him ride to his death. The morning light in the cave was harsh and unforgiving, revealing the pale, drawn lines of exhaustion on both their faces. The intimacy of the night before, born of desperation and darkness, felt fragile and unreal in the daylight. Cain had pushed the heavy, rusted iron box under a pile of loose rock, hiding it from view. But the oilcloth packet of papers was tucked securely inside his shirt, a weight against his skin, close to the puckered brand that marked him. They did not ride north to Tucson. Not yet. "You are in no condition to face an army, Fort," Evelyn said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. She had seen the way he favored his side. The deep, ragged wound from the day before, weeping blood through his makeshift bandage. "And I will not go to Tia Rosa's alone. Not yet. We need to think. We need water." "Dry Creek," he said, his voice a low rasp. "There is water there. A spring. It is half a day's ride south. It is on the way to Rosa's." "Then we ride to Dry Creek," she said, making the decision for both of them. They rode slowly, their horses picking their way through the desolate landscape. Cain was quiet, his body rigid with the effort of staying upright in the saddle. Every jolt sent a fresh wave of pain through him. Evelyn rode beside him, her rifle across her lap, her eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines. The shared kiss in the cave was a silent thing between them, a live coal. It was too new, too dangerous to acknowledge. They reached Dry Creek by midday. It was a scar on the land, a handful of crumbling adobe buildings and a single dusty street that ended in a dry, cracked riverbed. The spring Cain had mentioned was still there, a trickle of clean water seeping from a rock, collecting in a stone basin. As they dismounted, letting the horses drink, a voice called out, "Miss Hart Blackhorse, is that you?" Evelyn spun, her rifle coming up. Cain's hand went to his pistol, his movement a wince of pain. Sheriff Caleb Dunn was standing on the porch of the only building that looked remotely habitable, a former saloon. He was alone, his hands held high, his face a mask of frantic relief. "Do not shoot," he pleaded. "I am here to help. Thank God I found you." Evelyn stared at him, her finger tight on the trigger. "Like you helped us last time, Sheriff, by telling us you did not see us." I know," Dunn stammered, walking toward them, his hands still raised. "I made a mistake. I was scared, but when I got back to town, I heard Ransom's men. They are bragging about the Sun's Eye. They said they had you cornered. They think you are dead. When I heard that, I could not live with it. John Hart was my friend." Cain's pistol did not waver. "What do you want?" "Dunn." "I want to make it right," the sheriff said, his voice cracking with what sounded like genuine fear. "I know about the papers. I know what Ransom and Thorne are doing. It is poison. It is killing this territory. I want to help you get that proof to Tucson. I have a wagon. We can hide you. I can get you past the patrols." Evelyn looked at Cain. This was it, the law, the very thing her father had believed in. Maybe he was not as corrupt as Ransom. Maybe he was just a weak man trying to be brave. "He is lying," Cain said, his voice flat. "I am not," Dunn insisted, desperation making his voice high. "I swear on my badge. I swear on my wife's grave. I am trying to help you. Son, you are bleeding. You will not make it 10 miles. Cain watched him. He saw the sweat on the sheriff's brow, the way his eyes kept darting to the saddlebag where Cain had briefly stored the canteens, the bag where the papers should have been. "All right, Sheriff," Cain said slowly, easing his hand from his pistol. "We could use the help." Evelyn looked at him, shocked, but he gave her a look so quick she almost missed it, a look that said, "Play along." "Thank you, Sheriff," Evelyn said, lowering her rifle. "We are We are in trouble." "I know, child," Dunn said, his relief palpable. He wiped his face with a bandana. "Come inside, out of the sun. Let us get you cleaned up. You found the box. Then the proof." "We found it," Kane said, walking slowly, leaning heavily on Evelyn's shoulder. "But we had to leave the heavy box behind. We just have the papers." "The papers?" Dunn's eyes lit up. "Even better, lighter, faster. Where are they? Are they safe?" "They are safe," Kane said. They stepped onto the porch. Dunn held the door open for them, a gracious host. "After you," the sheriff said, as Evelyn passed him. Dunn's hand, the one that had been holding the door, grabbed her. He yanked her back, spinning her around, and pressed the cold, round muzzle of a pistol to her temple. "The papers, Black Horse," Dunn said, his voice no longer pleading. It was cold, hard, and flat. "Right now, or I will scatter her brains all over this porch." Evelyn froze, the metal of the gun biting into her skin. Kane had not even flinched. He had expected it. He looked at Dunn, his eyes as dead as a snake's. "You were never going to help us. Ransom pays better than the county." Dunn sneered. "And he pays a lot more for those papers. He knows you have them. He does not care about you. He does not even care about her. He just wants what your father stole. Now, the papers, or she dies." "Sheriff, you lied," Evelyn cried, her voice muffled against his arm. "Be quiet, girl," Dunn hissed. "They are in my shirt," Kane said. He put his good hand up, slowly, showing it was empty. "I will get them. Just let her go." "Oh, I do not think so," Dunn said. "You reach, I shoot her. You drop them, right there on the ground. Then you back away." Kane looked at Evelyn. Her eyes were wide, terrified. He saw the betrayal in them. Not his, but Dunn's. The death of her last hope in the law. "All right," Kane said. He reached his hand inside his shirt, his movements agonizingly slow. He pulled out the oilcloth packet. It was thick. "Here it is." "Drop it," Dunn commanded. Kane let it fall to the wooden planks of the porch with a soft thud. "Good," Dunn said, his gaze fixed on the packet. "Now, back inside, both of you. Move." He kept the gun to Evelyn's head, trying to shuffle all three of them sideways toward the door. It was a clumsy maneuver. He was a clumsy man. He was focused on Kane, but his eyes kept flicking to the packet on the floor. He wanted it. That was the mistake Kane was waiting for. The moment Dunn's eyes shifted to the packet, Kane moved. He was not a wounded man. He was a predator. He launched himself, not at Dunn, but at Evelyn. He grabbed her with his good arm, twisted his body, and threw them both backward, off the porch. They crashed into the dust in a tangle of limbs. Dunn, shocked, fired. The bullet went wild, ripping through the air where Evelyn's head had been. Kane rolled, his pistol already in his hand. Dunn fired again, the shot kicking up dust by Kane's boot. Kane fired once, from the ground, a single, deliberate shot. The sound was flat in the open air. Dunn screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of rage and surprise. He staggered, dropping his pistol. His hand clamped to his right shoulder. Blood pumped between his fingers. You shot me," he howled, his face white with shock. "You are dead." "Dunn?" Kane roared, pushing himself to his feet, the pistol steady in his hand. He grabbed the packet from the porch. The sheriff, clutching his bleeding shoulder, scrambled for his horse. He was crying, babbling in terror. "He will kill me! Ransom will kill me for this! You are dead! Black Horse! You are both dead! I will find you! I will hunt you!" He fumbled his way into the saddle and kicked his horse, galloping madly out of Dry Creek, a stain of red spreading down his dusty vest. Kane stood panting, the adrenaline fading, leaving him shaking and weak. The effort had cost him. His side was bleeding freely again. Evelyn was on her hands and knees, gasping for breath, the grit from the street on her face. She looked up at him, her eyes wild. He... I know, Kane said, his voice grim. He pushed the papers back into his shirt. We cannot stay here. He will be back, or he will send ransom. Where can we go? She whispered, her voice hollow. They were out of options. Kane looked down the empty, dusty street. At the very end, half hidden by a dead cottonwood, was a small, crumbling adobe structure. A simple wooden cross, bleached gray by the sun, hung crookedly over the door. There, he said, a church. It is shelter. He helped her up, and together they staggered toward the abandoned chapel. They pushed open the warped wooden door, which scraped heavily on the floor. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of old, dry wood and mice. Light streamed in through a hole in the roof, illuminating a single, dusty beam. A few broken pews lay scattered. A simple wooden altar stood at the front, covered in dust. It was a forgotten, broken place, but it was safe. Evelyn helped Kane slide to the floor, his back against the altar. She sank down beside him, the last of her strength gone. He was the law, she whispered, her voice breaking. She pulled her knees to her chest. He was the law, and he tried to murder us for money. My father believed in the law. The law in this territory is bought, Kane said, his voice rough with pain. He was trying to press his bandana to his side, but his hand was shaking. Evelyn looked at the blood. She took the bandana from him, her hands now steady. This is all my fault, she whispered, her voice cracking. I brought you into this, my father's letter, my ranch. No, he said, his voice harsh. This started for me a long time ago, in that canyon, with Captain Thorne. She finished the bandage, pulling it tight, her touch gentle but firm. I am so afraid. Kane, she said, her voice small, a child's voice in the dusty silence. Everyone leaves. Everyone betrays. My father, he left, and he never came back. Done. He betrayed us. And you're going to go to Tucson. You are going to leave me, and you will not come back either. Will you? Her vulnerability was a blade in his gut, sharper than any bullet. He looked at her, this strong, brave woman, now broken in the shadows of a ruined church. Evelyn, he said, his voice softer than he thought possible. He reached out with his good hand, his fingers finding hers in the dust. I am not your father. I am not done. I am the one who gets left. The army left me. My own people cast me out. Ransom branded me and left me for dead. I do not know how to trust anyone. He paused, his thumb rubbing the back of her hand. No one has ever trusted me. Not until you. No one has ever come back for me. Not until you. The confession hung in the sacred, dusty air. They were two broken, solitary souls, stripped bare. I do not know how to pray, Evelyn whispered, tears finally tracing clean lines through the grime on her cheeks. After all this, I do not think I believe in anything anymore. Kane looked up at the broken cross, silhouetted against the hole in the roof. I do not either, he said. But I want this. I want a chance. For us. He squeezed her hand, his grip tight. I want a chance to live, to be real. They did not bow their heads. They did not speak the words of any religion. They just sat, two wounded people in a forgotten place, holding on to each other. They were not praying to God. They were praying to the desperate, fragile hope of a future. The sun began to set, the light in the chapel turning from gold to a deep, bruised purple. The desert air grew cold. Kane was shivering. the blood loss and the pain taking their toll. "We have to stay here tonight," she said. "You are too weak to move." She retrieved their single saddle blanket. She sat beside him again, unfolding it, draping it over his shoulders, and then, without hesitation, sliding under it with him, huddling close. The intimacy was not born of desire, but of a desperate, shared need for warmth, for life. He put his good arm around her, pulling her against his chest. She rested her head on his shoulder, her ear over the ugly brand, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. She could feel him breathing. "Good," he murmured, his lips against her hair. She turned her head, her face buried in the curve of his neck. She could smell his skin dust, sweat, gunpowder, and the faint, coppery scent of his blood. It was the most real thing she had ever known. "I am so tired of being alone," she whispered. "You are not," he breathed, his hand stroking her hair. She lifted her head. Their faces were inches apart in the gloom. He looked at her, his eyes dark and intense, and she saw not a killer, not an outlaw, but a man who was just as lost as she was. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, hungry kiss of the cave. It was slow. It was tender. It was a question. She answered, her lips parting under his. This was not a kiss of passion, but of solace. It was an exploration. His hand moved from her hair, down her back, holding her, not pulling, just holding. Her own hands came up to frame his face, her fingers tracing the rough stubble on his jaw. She let out a small, trembling sigh, a sound that was half a sob. It was the release of every fear, every moment of loneliness, every betrayal. It was her soft cry, a sound of surrender, not to him, but to this fragile moment of hope. He heard it, and it broke something inside him. He held her tighter, a fierce, protective embrace. He would risk everything for this, for her touch, for this sound. He would not let the world break her. They did not go further. The connection they had forged was too new, too sacred for a place this broken. It was a deeper intimacy, a healing of two souls who had never known a safe harbor. They fell asleep like that, in each other's arms, under a single blanket, while the desert wind moaned outside the chapel walls. They woke to a gray, heavy dawn. The air was different. The wind was not just moaning, it was howling, thick with dust. "A storm," Kane said, his voice rough. He sat up, his face tight with pain, but his eyes were clearer. The rest, the warmth, had helped. The fever had not taken hold. "I have to go," he said, and this time it was a statement of fact. Evelyn's heart clenched, but she nodded. She was not the frightened girl from the night before. She was a woman with a purpose. "I know. Dunn will be back," he said. "Or Ransom will come. They will look for us together. We have to split up." "I will go to Tia Rosa's," she said, her voice steady. "South. You were right. They will not expect me to double back to her." "And I will go to Fort Lowell," he said. He pulled the oilcloth packet from his shirt. He looked at it, then at her. He unfolded the papers and separated one sheet, a single page from the ledger. "This one, it has Dunn's name on it, and Thorne's signature." He handed it to her. "You keep this. Hide it. If I do not make it, you have something. You have proof." She took the page, her fingers brushing his. She folded it carefully and tucked it deep into the bodice of her dress, the paper crinkling against her skin. "You will make it," she said. It was not a question. It was a command. "I will," he said. They stood at the broken door of the chapel. The wind was a physical force, stinging their faces with sand. It was a bad omen, a sign of the chaos to come. They did not kiss. The intimacy of the night was too profound for a simple goodbye. They just looked at each other. A long, silent look that said everything. "Be safe. Come back. I believe in you." I will find you, Evelyn Hart, he said, his voice loud to be heard over the rising storm. I know, she shouted back. He mounted his horse, a lone, battered figure. He turned his horse north, into the teeth of the wind. She mounted hers and turned south. They rode away from each other, two small figures, swallowed instantly by the vast, swirling, yellow dust of the desert storm. The south wind was a physical blow. Evelyn rode with her head down, her bandana pulled up over her nose, the world reduced to a stinging, yellow-gray blur. The storm Kane had predicted had swallowed the desert whole. The air was thick with sand, and the sun was a faint, bruised smear overhead. She could barely see her horse's ears. She was riding blind, trusting her mount and her memory to find the low adobe of Tia Rosa's cantina. She felt them before she saw them, the change in the wind, the heavy, rhythmic drumming that was not her own horse. Three figures materialized from the dust, surrounding her, their horses blocking her path. Well, look here. A familiar, oily voice cut through the howl of the wind. The little lost lamb! Silas. He sat on his big bay horse, his duster coated in yellow grime, his bowler hat pulled down low. Two other men, faces hidden by bandanas, flanked him. Get out of my way, Silas! Evelyn yelled, her hand dropping to the butt of her pistol. Silas laughed. Now, Miss Hart, that is no way to be, Mr. Ransom has been worried sick about you. His eyes, cold and amused, roamed over her. He is very eager to see you. He has a family reunion planned. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. Before she could draw, one of the riders lunged, grabbing her reins. The other grabbed her arm, wrenching it behind her back. She cried out, fighting, but she was exhausted and outnumbered. Silas dismounted, his movements lazy. We will take that, he said, pulling her pistol from her holster. He patted her down, his hands rough. His fingers brushed the folded paper in her bodice. And what is this love letter? He ripped her dress open at the neck and pulled the paper out. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the names. Thorne. Dunn. Well, Mr. Ransom will be very pleased. He tied her hands to the saddle horn. Take her to the mine, Silas ordered. Mr. Ransom is waiting. Miles away, Kane Blackhorse had reached the high, sun-baked walls of Fort Lowell. The storm was bad here, too, but the fort was sheltered by the mountains. He did not ride in the main gate. He used his knowledge, the old, forgotten ways of a scout, working his way around to a breach in the adobe wall near the quartermaster's stores. The papers were a hard, flat weight against his chest. He moved like a ghost, keeping to the shadows, his face grim. The fort felt wrong, too quiet. There were guards, but they were nervous, jumpy. He knew the layout. Major Croft's office was on the second floor of the main barracks. He slipped inside, his boots silent on the wooden floor. He moved up the stairs. He heard voices, Captain Thorne, and another, Sheriff Caleb Dunn. Shot me, Dunn was saying, his voice high and whining. The half-breed, he shot me, but I rode all night. I told you he was coming. You were a fool to let him go. Caleb. Captain Thorne's voice was a low, educated sneer. You were supposed to get the papers, not get yourself shot. He is here, Dunn said. I know he is. He's coming for Croft. You have to stop him. I will, Thorne said. My men are waiting. Croft has been reassigned. He is inspecting the border. He will not be back for a week. This is my fort now. It was a trap. Dunn had not gone back to Ransom. He had ridden here, to the other head of the snake. Kane backed away from the door, his hand on his pistol. He had to get out. He had to get back to Evelyn. A floorboard creaked behind him. There, a soldier yelled. Kane spun. Two cavalrymen stood at the end of the hall. He dived, not for the stairs, but for the window at the end of the hall. He crashed through the cheap glass and thin wood frame, falling one story, tucking and rolling as he hit the hard-packed dirt of the parade ground. He came up running. Shouts erupted. "Alarm, alarm! He is in the compound!" A bullet whined past his ear. He ran, zigzagging, for the breach in the wall. Soldiers were pouring out of the barracks. He saw Thorne on the balcony, firing his pistol. Kane fired back once, twice, scattering them. He reached his horse, vaulting into the saddle. He dug his heels in, the horse leaping forward. He raced out of the fort, a hail of bullets following him. He was hit. He felt the burn. A hot iron searing his left thigh. He gritted his teeth and rode on, leaning low, disappearing into the swirling dust of the storm. He rode for an hour, the pain in his leg a steady, sickening throb. He had failed. The papers, in the fall, in the fight, they were gone. Lost. He had lost the proof. He had lost everything. He stopped his horse, his body slumping. He had to warn Evelyn. He turned south, riding back the way he had come, toward Tia Rosa's. Evelyn had never seen a place so hopeless. The Apache copper mine was a gaping maw in the side of a red mountain, surrounded by shacks and slag heaps. The storm howled here, a chorus of damned souls. Silas pushed her, her hands still bound, toward a small, solid-looking building. Luke Ransom was waiting inside. He was not a rough man like Silas. He was dressed in a fine black suit, his graying hair neatly combed. He looked like a banker, or a preacher. He smiled as she was shoved in. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "Welcome. I am so glad you could join us." He was holding the paper, her page, in his hand. This is very interesting, but it is just one page. Where is the rest?" "I do not know what you are talking about," she spat. "A pity," Ransom sighed. He looked at Silas. "Did he have it?" Just then, the door opened, and Sheriff Dunn stumbled in, his arm in a crude sling, his face pale. "Mr. Ransom," he panted. I went back to the cave. Where they hid, I found it." He was holding the heavy iron chest. He dropped it on the floor with a heavy thud. Ransom looked at the box, then at Dunn. He did not look pleased. He took a crowbar from the corner and pried the damaged hinge open. He lifted the lid. It was empty. Dunn's face went white. It must have fallen out. Black Horse, he must have it." Ransom looked at Dunn with pure, cold contempt. "You are a fool, Caleb, a useless, wounded fool." He looked back at Evelyn, his smile returning. "It seems my trap at the fort was unnecessary, or perhaps it was only half successful. No matter, I have a better lure." "What do you want?" Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "I want the papers, of course," Ransom said, "and I want Kane Blackhorse. He has been a thorn in my side for too long. He cost me Captain Thorne's trust. He shot my sheriff, and he stole my brand." He's gone," Evelyn lied. "You will never find him." "Oh, he will come," Ransom said, his smile widening. "He will come for you, and he will come for his father-in-law." Evelyn stared. "What?" "Your father," Ransom said, enjoying the moment. "John Hart. He was not a smart man. He thought he could steal from me, from the army, and get away with it. He thought he could hide my ledgers." Ransom shook his head. "I did not kill him. Killing him was inefficient. Why kill a man when you can make him work? He is quite good with a pickaxe." Evelyn's world tilted. "He is alive," she whispered. "Oh, yes," Ransom said. "He is in Shaft 3. He has been working off his debt. He is my guarantee. And now, so are you." He nodded to Silas. "Tie her up, outside the main shaft, where he will see her when he comes." Cain rode with the storm, his new wound bleeding, his heart a cold stone. He had lost the papers. He had failed her. He pushed his horse, riding for Tia Rosa's, praying Evelyn had made it. He was halfway there when he saw the tracks. Dozens of horses. They had crossed the plain, heading east, toward the mountains, toward the Apache mine. He knew those tracks. Ransom's men. No, he breathed. He wrenched his horse's head, turning, following the trail. The storm was abating, the wind dying down, but the sky was a dark, angry purple, bruised with thunderclouds. He reached the mine as twilight fell. He left his horse a mile out and moved on foot, his Apache blood, his old scout training, taking over. He was no longer a man. He was a hunter. He was vengeance. He saw her. She was tied to a wooden support post at the mouth of the main mine shaft. Her hair was loose, whipped across her face by the wind. She was slumped, her head down, but she was alive. He moved into the shadows of the shacks. He counted 4 guards, 2 by her, 1 on the roof of Ransom's office, 1 by the boiler house. He moved, the first guard, by the boiler house. Never heard him. Cain's knife, the long, heavy blade he had carried since his army days, slid under his ribs. It was quick, silent, and brutal. He eased the body into the shadows. The second guard, on the roof, was harder. Cain climbed the outside wall, his wounded legs screaming. He pulled himself over the edge. The man was looking out, toward the desert. Cain broke his neck with his bare hands. A single, sharp crack. He moved to the mine shaft, 2 guards, playing cards on a crate. He was 20 yards away. He was a shadow. 10 yards. "Evening, boys," a voice said. Cain froze. Luke Ransom stepped out of his office, a lantern in one hand, a shotgun in the other. He had been waiting. "I knew you would come, Black Horse," Ransom said, the lantern light illuminating his calm, cruel face. The guards leaped up, their rifles leveled at Cain. "You are just too predictable." Evelyn's head snapped up. "Cain, no, it is a trap run." "Drop the knife, Cain," Ransom said. "Drop it, or Silas will put a bullet in her pretty head." Silas stepped out from the mine shaft, his pistol pressed to Evelyn's temple. Cain looked at Evelyn. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the fight. He looked at Ransom. He let the bloody knife fall from his hand. He raised his good arm, his left still at his side. "That is better," Ransom smiled. "You see, Cain, you cannot win. I have the law. I have the army. I have the mine. And I have her." He gestured to Evelyn. "She is the final piece. I will give you a deal. Your life for hers. Just ride away. Disappear. Let me have the girl and the land, and I will let you live. You can go back to whatever it is you people do." Cain looked at Evelyn, tied to the post, her hair blowing, the dust thick on her face. She was the only thing that had ever been real. "No deal," Cain said. "Pity," Ransom sighed. "Silas, kill him." "Ahora!" a voice screamed from the darkness. "Now for John Hart." A shot exploded from the ridge above the mine. The guard to the left of Ransom spun, his rifle clattering, and fell. Everyone froze. Tia Rosa stepped into the lantern light, an old, long-barreled shotgun in her hands. And behind her, pouring over the slag heaps, were the miners, 20 of them, gaunt, angry men, their faces black with soot, armed with pickaxes, shovels, and 2 or 3 ancient rifles. "What is this?" Ransom bellowed. "This," Tia Rosa yelled, "is what happens when you steal from the dead, Ataquen." The miners charged, a silent, furious wave. "Now, Cain," Evelyn screamed. Cain did not need to be told. He dived, not at Ransom, but at Silas, hitting him low, his shoulder driving into the man's gut. They crashed to the ground. The pistol went off, the shot going wild. Chaos erupted. The miners swarmed the remaining guard. Ransom fired his shotgun into the crowd, men screaming and falling. Cain was on the ground, his good hand on Silas's throat, his other fumbling for the man's pistol. Silas was strong, his fingers gouging at Cain's eyes. Evelyn, still tied, kicked backward, her boot connecting with the post, trying to break it. A flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in a brilliant, terrifying white. In that flash, Cain saw Tia Rosa level her shotgun at Ransom. Ransom fired first. The buckshot tore into the old woman's chest, throwing her backward. "No!" Cain roared. That distraction cost him. Silas twisted, bringing his knee up into Cain's wounded thigh. Cain screamed, the pain blinding him. Silas scrambled to his feet and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Cain staggered up. He grabbed the fallen guard's rifle. He saw Ransom, calmly reloading his shotgun, standing over Tia Rosa's body. Cain aimed. A shot rang out, but it was not from Cain. It came from the ridge. Sheriff Caleb Dunn, his face pale, his arm in a sling, was standing there, his pistol smoking. Ransom looked down, surprised, at his own shoulder. A red flower was blooming on his fine black coat. He looked up at Dunn, his face a mask of disbelief. "You," Ransom whispered. Dunn fired again, but Ransom was already moving. He stumbled, scrambling onto his horse, which was tethered by the office. He kicked it, hard, and galloped into the night, one arm hanging useless, wounded but alive. Cain ran to Evelyn, cutting her bonds with his knife. She fell into his arms, sobbing, clinging to him. The miners had surrounded the remaining guards. The fight was over, in seconds. Cain held her, his heart hammering. He looked over her head. Tia Rosa was on the ground. He ran to her. She was still breathing, her chest a ruin. She looked up at him, her eyes already glazing. "John Hart," she whispered, coughing blood. In the shaft, Liberalo, free him." And then, as the first drops of rain began to fall, Tia Rosa died. Cain closed her eyes. He stood up, his face carved from stone. He looked at the miners, at Evelyn, at the dark, gaping mouth of the mine. "He is alive," Evelyn whispered, her voice full of a terrible, fragile hope. "My father, he is in there." Cain picked up the lantern. "I know," he said, his voice a low, deadly rumble. "Ransom is wounded. He will not get far. But first, we get your father." He looked at the dark shaft, his hand tightening on his knife. Ransom had escaped, but the night was not over. The lantern light cut a weak, trembling circle in the absolute darkness of the mine shaft. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of sulfur and human misery. Evelyn walked beside Cain, her hand gripping his good arm, as much for her own support as for his. Behind them, the miners followed, their picks and shovels now feeling more like weapons than tools. Their boots were silent on the damp earth. Tia Rosa's last words echoed in the dark. "Shaft 3, free him." They found it at the bottom of the main slope, a low, narrow tunnel braced with rotting timbers. Cain held the lantern high. "Mr. Hart." His voice, low and rough, was swallowed by the oppressive silence. A sound answered, a dry, hacking cough. They moved faster, stumbling into the side tunnel. At the end, in a small, damp cavern, a figure was huddled against the wall. He was thin, a skeleton draped in rags, his hair and beard a long, matted tangle of gray. A heavy iron chain was bolted to the rock and shackled around his ankle. Evelyn's breath caught. She could not move. This was not her father. This was a ghost. Cain stepped forward, holding the light up to the man's face. The man flinched, raising a hand to block the sudden glare. His eyes, sunk deep in his skull, were nonetheless sharp. They were her eyes. "Evelyn," he whispered. The voice was a dry, cracked rasp, but it was his. "Father?" She breathed, the word a sob. She fell to her knees in the mud beside him, her hands touching his face, his beard. They said you were gone. They lied," John Hart rasped, his arms coming around her, his grip surprisingly strong, holding onto her as if she were the ghost. "My girl, my strong girl, you came." Kane said nothing. He watched this reunion for one hard second. He saw the fire in John Hart's eyes, the same unbreakable will he saw in his daughter. He stepped forward and shattered the shackle with a single, powerful blow from a miner's pickaxe. "We have to go," Kane said, his voice gentle but firm. "Ransom is wounded, but he is not dead." They helped John Hart to his feet. He was weak, his legs trembling. But he stood. He leaned on Evelyn and one of the miners, and they moved as fast as they could, back up the sloping tunnel, out of the dark and into the night. They emerged from the mine shaft into chaos. The brief rain shower had passed, but the air was electric, the sky a dark, churning purple. The bodies of Tia Rosa and Ransom's men lay where they had fallen. "We have to go," Evelyn said, looking at her father. "We have to get you home." "Home," her father whispered, and he looked south. Evelyn followed his gaze. The clouds on the southern horizon were not dark. They were glowing, a low, pulsing, sick orange that lit the belly of the sky. She went cold. "No," she breathed. Kane had seen it, too. His face, already grim, became a mask of stone. "Ransom," he said. The name was a curse. He did not run. He doubled back. "He is finishing it." "Heart's hollow," John Hart said, his voice no longer weak, but filled with a sudden, terrible iron. "He is burning my home." "He is burning our home," Evelyn said, her hand finding Kane's. "Get the horses." Kane commanded the miners. "All of them. We ride." The chase was a desperate, thundering ride through the canyons of Red Mesa. They were a strange, ghostly army, a wounded half-breed scout, a rancher's daughter, a man risen from the dead, and a band of soot-covered miners hungry for justice. The orange glow on the horizon was their beacon, a wound in the night. They arrived to find hell. It was not the barn this time. It was the house, her house. It was an inferno. Flames leaping from the windows, the roof already collapsing. The heat was a physical blow, even from 100 yards away. And in the flickering, hellish light, 2 men sat on horseback, watching it burn. Luke Ransom, his arm in a crude sling, his fine suit covered in mud and blood, and beside him, holding a sputtering torch, was Silas. "You should have stayed dead." "Hart!" Ransom screamed, his voice raw with madness as he saw them ride up. "I will burn every last trace of you from this land." "Ransom!" Evelyn screamed, her voice a pure, sharp blade of hatred. "Kill them!" Ransom roared at Silas. Silas dropped the torch and raised his rifle. The fight exploded. It was not a battle. It was a brawl in the dirt and smoke. The miners charged, firing their few rifles, swinging their picks. Evelyn's 2 remaining horses, trapped in the smaller corral, screamed and kicked, their panicked cries adding to the din. Evelyn pulled her father behind the stone water trough. "Stay down." Kane was on foot, his rifle in his hand, moving with a deadly limp. He fired, and one of Ransom's men, a man he had not seen, hiding by the woodshed, cried out and fell. A shot rang out from the ridge above them. Silas, who was taking careful aim at Evelyn's head, suddenly stiffened. He looked down, a dark, confused expression on his face, at the new, dark stain spreading across his chest. He toppled sideways from his horse. Evelyn looked up. On the ridge, silhouetted against the dark sky, was Sheriff Caleb Dunn, His pistol was smoking. He had made his choice. Ransom saw it. He saw Silas fall. He saw his men overwhelmed by the miners. He saw John Hart alive. He saw Evelyn. He saw his empire, built on blood and paper, turning to ash. He screamed, a sound of pure animal rage. He wrenched his horse around, ignoring the miners. Ignoring Cain. He saw only Evelyn, her face bright in the firelight, the woman who had caused it all. He raised his shotgun with his one good arm. "You die!" he bellowed, spurring his horse directly at her. "Evelyn!" her father screamed. Cain was too far. His leg was shot. He could not run fast enough to intercept. He just moved. He did not think. He launched himself, a desperate, lunging dive, covering the last few feet. He threw his body in front of Evelyn just as Ransom fired. "No!" she screamed. The sound of the shotgun was a deafening boom. Cain took the entire blast in his back and left shoulder. The force of it threw him forward, his body slamming into her, knocking them both to the ground. He collapsed on top of her, a dead, heavy weight. Ransom, in his mad triumph, pulled his horse up, raising the shotgun to reload. He did not see Evelyn, her face a mask of cold fury. Emerged from under Cain's body, she grabbed the rifle from her father's trembling hands. She did not crouch. She did not hide. She stood up, in the full, terrible light of her burning home, and leveled the rifle. She was calm. The world narrowed to the front sight and the man who had taken everything. She fired. The shot was clean. The bullet hit Luke Ransom square in the chest. He looked down, a look of profound, almost comical surprise on his face. He clutched his heart. He did not fall immediately. He swayed in the saddle for a long second, a dark king surveying his burning kingdom. And then he toppled sideways, hitting the red mud with a wet, final thud. The rain of blood was over. For a moment, there was no sound but the roar of the fire. The miners stopped. Dunn stayed on the ridge. John Hart just stared. Evelyn dropped the rifle. She fell to her knees in the mud beside the man who had saved her. He was on his face, his duster smoking, his blood a black pool that mingled with the red, muddy earth. "Cain," she whispered. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not touch him. "Cain." She finally found the strength. She rolled him over, gently. His eyes were closed. His face was pale, streaked with soot and ash. His chest and shoulder were a terrible, shredded ruin. "You stupid, brave man," she cried, the words tearing from her throat. She pulled his head into her lap, cradling him against her. He was breathing. It was a faint, shallow, hitching breath. His eyelids flickered. He opened his eyes. He saw her. She was sobbing now. Great, tearing sobs that shook her whole body. "You cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You cannot leave me. I will not let you. Do you hear me? You promised." Her tears fell onto his face, washing clean tracks through the grime. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, her lips trembling. She kissed his cheek. "Do not go," she begged. "Please, do not go." She pressed her lips to his, a desperate, salty kiss of tears and ash. He tried to breathe, a small, pained gasp. The sound was her name. The narrative slowed. There was only the crackle of the fire, the sound of her crying, and the shallow, fragile sound of his breathing. A life hanging by a single, frayed thread. A drop of water hit her hand. She looked up, uncomprehending. Another drop hit her cheek. The sky opened. The storm that had threatened all day, the storm that had held its breath, finally broke. The first drops turned into a deluge, a cold cleansing. Pounding rain began to fall. It hissed on the burning timbers, sending up great, choking clouds of steam. It soaked her to the skin in seconds. It washed the blood from his face. The fire, which had been a raging monster, sputtered, steamed, and began to die. It was a baptism, a rebirth. He is alive. Her father's voice. He and Caleb Dunn were standing over her, their faces grim in the dying light. Evelyn, we have to get him out of the rain. What is left of the shed, it is dry. She looked down at Kane's face, peaceful now, his eyes closed. She held him tighter. He is alive, she whispered to the storm, as if it were a prayer. He is alive. They carried him to the only structure the rain had not claimed, the small, sturdy woodshed. John Hart, his body frail but his will pure iron, helped Caleb Dunn carry the man who had saved his daughter. Evelyn walked beside them, her hand never leaving Kane's, her face a pale, rain-streaked mask in the dying glow of the fire. They laid him on a pile of dry tarpaulins. The buckshot had savaged him, a catastrophic wound that had taken the full, close-range blast. It was a miracle he was breathing at all. He is dying, John Hart said, his voice a harsh whisper. No, Evelyn said, her voice flat and cold. She was not crying anymore. She was beyond tears. She began, with practiced, steady hands, to cut away the ruined, bloody duster. Done! The sheriff looked at her, his face ashen, his own wounded shoulder forgotten. He had killed a man tonight. He had chosen a side. Ma'am. Ride, she commanded. Ride to Tucson, not Red Mesa. They have an army doctor at the fort. You tell them you have a man here shot, a key witness in the ransom case. You use your badge. You bring him. If you have to put a gun to his head, you bring him. Dunn looked at John Hart, then back at Evelyn. He saw the same unbending steel in both of them. This was his redemption. I will, he said. He did not wince as he pulled himself onto his horse. I will bring him, or I will die trying. He disappeared into the rain and the darkness. Kane lived. It was a fight waged in shadow and whispers. The doctor came, a hard-bitten, whiskey-soaked army surgeon who swore at the wound, at the rain, and at the world in general. But he was good. He spent 6 hours on the floor of the woodshed, picking lead shot from Kane's back and shoulder, stitching what could be stitched, and shaking his head. He should be dead. The doctor grunted, packing his bag. I have seen men die from a splinter. This is just plain stubbornness, or he is too mean to die. Evelyn never left his side. For a week. She sat with him in the woodshed, her father and the miners working to build a lean-to against the scorched wall of the house, a temporary shelter. She fed Kane water, then broth. She changed his bandages. She watched him fight his way back from the fever, his muttering no longer in Apache, but her name. Evelyn. On the 8th day, he woke, his eyes clear. He saw her, her face thin and exhausted, her hair matted. You stayed, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I told you I would, she said, her hand finding his. The world changed quickly after that. The storm had broken. Not just the weather, but the grip of fear over the territory. With Luke Ransom dead, his empire, built on intimidation, collapsed overnight. His hired guns vanished like coyotes at sunrise. Sheriff Caleb Dunn did not just bring the doctor. He had found the single ledger page on Silas's body. He rode to Tucson and turned himself, and the paper, over to the Army Command at Fort Lowell. A court-martial was convened. Captain Elias Thorne, his name on the confession of a lawman, was arrested. The trial was swift. Caleb Dunn, his arm in a sling, took the stand. He confessed to extortion, to taking bribes, to being an accomplice. He named Thorne. Then John Hart, clean-shaven and dressed in a borrowed suit, told his story. He told of the ledgers he had found, the conspiracy between Ransom and Thorne, his capture and his enslavement, his testimony, coming from a man the territory had believed dead, was explosive. And then Kane testified. Evelyn watched him walk into the courtroom. He was pale, thin, his left arm bound tight to his chest. But he walked tall. He wore a clean shirt she had bought him. The brand over his heart was a faint ridge beneath the cotton. He looked out of place, a piece of the wild desert trapped in a civilized, polished wooden box. He spoke, his voice low and clear. He told of the canyon, of the massacre Thorne had ordered. He told of ransom, of the brand, of the hunt for the papers. He did not speak with anger. He spoke with a flat, cold honesty that chilled the room. When he was done, the silence was absolute. Captain Thorne was found guilty. Caleb Dunn was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. A light sentence given his confession and his actions at the end. John Hart was a hero. And Evelyn Hart, her father's name cleared, was given back the deed to Hart's Hollow, the fraudulent tax claims and debts erased by the court. After the trial, the town of Red Mesa, which had shunned her, suddenly wanted to celebrate her. They called her a pioneer, a survivor. She and her father stood on the steps of the courthouse, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, shaking hands with men who had crossed the street to avoid her. She looked for Kane. He was not there. She found him at the edge of town, by the livery, saddling his horse, the one he had ridden from the fort. "You are leaving," she said. It was not a question. He did not turn to look at her. He kept his good hand busy, checking the cinch. "It is over," he said. "Over," she said, her voice rising. "We won, Kane, we won. We can go home. We can rebuild." "You can," he said. He finally turned. His face was unreadable. "Look at them. Evelyn, they see you. You are Miss Hart, the rancher's daughter. A hero." He touched his own chest, near the brand. "You know what they see when they look at me, a half-breed, a killer, a branded man, the outlaw you were hiding." "I do not care what they see," she cried, grabbing his arm. "I care what I see. I see the man who saved me, the man who I—" She could not say it. "I do not belong in that world," he said, his voice soft but final. He looked at her hands, clean and pale, and then at his own, scarred and dark. "I do not belong in your home. I am a ghost. Evelyn, I was a ghost when you found me. It is time I went back to the shadows." "You are not a ghost," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You are real. You are the most real thing I have ever known." He put his good hand on her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "John Hart is back," he said. "He can protect you now. You are safe. That is all that matters." He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, or of solace. It was a kiss of goodbye. It was gentle, and it was devastating. "Live well, Evelyn Hart," he whispered. He swung up into the saddle. He did not look back. He rode north, toward the mountains, toward the high, empty places. She watched him go, a lone rider shrinking against the vast blue sky, until he was just a speck, and then he was gone. A month passed. The first green shoots of new life pushed up through the ashes at Hart's Hollow. The miners, grateful to John Hart for their freedom, had come to help. A new house was rising, built of fresh-cut pine and river stone. Her father was laughing, a sound she had not heard in years. The ranch was alive again, but her heart was a hollow, empty place. She received mail, carried from Tucson by a circuit rider. There were bank notices, letters from neighbors, congratulations, and there was one small, folded piece of paper with no name on it. Oh. She opened it. The handwriting was rough, spelled out in careful, blocky letters, the kind a man who is not used to writing would form. It was only 9 words. "If the wind still carries your cry, I will come." She closed her eyes, clutching the paper to her chest. She stood there for a long time, the sounds of the hammer and saw fading, the voices of the men fading. All she could hear was the wind, whistling down from the high mesas. It smelled of rain and old, cold ash. She walked out, past the new corrals, to the edge of the pasture, and she looked north, toward the mountains. The sun was setting, and a light rain had begun to fall, a soft mist that blurred the line between the earth and the sky. She waited. She did not know for what. She just stood and let the wind and the rain wash over her, the note held tight in her hand. And then she saw it, a shape, a speck, in the far distance, moving through the rain-swept dusk. It was not a deer. It was not a stray. It was a horse, and it had a rider. He was not riding fast. He was just coming, a steady, inevitable shadow returning from the mist. Evelyn did not know his name. She did not need to. She stood frozen, her heart a wild, frantic bird in her chest. He rode closer and closer until he stopped, his horse breathing softly, just 10 yards away. He was soaked, his hat pulled low, his duster dark with rain. He just sat there, looking at her. Evelyn's heart did not run to him. She did not cry out. She just looked back, and slowly, a smile touched her lips. It was not a simple smile. It was a smile that held all the pain of the past, all the scars, all the fire, and all the loss. And yet, it was a smile of pure, impossible joy. The climax was over. The battle was done, and the quiet had begun. 1 year passed. The high desert wind still blew over Red Mesa, but it no longer carried the sharp, bitter scent of gunpowder and fear. It carried the sweet, clean smell of fresh-cut pine, of curing hay, and the distant perfume of water from the mended creek. Heart's Hollow was not the scorched scar it had been. The rains that had quenched the fire had also, in their mercy, brought life. The valley, cupped in the hand of the red mountains, was greener than Evelyn had ever seen it. The house stood proud. It was not the small, lonely ranch house she had inherited. It was a fortress of peace, rebuilt not just as it was, but stronger, with a wide, welcoming porch that faced north, toward the mountains Cain loved. It was built of heavy stone from the creek bed and thick pine logs, hauled down from the high country by the miners, the men her father had freed, who had become the heart's closest friends and staunchest allies. Today, they were finishing the barn. It stood on the exact same footprint as the old one, on the square of dark earth where she had found him, the ground that had been consecrated by fire and then cleansed by the storm. Cain was on the roof, his shirt discarded in the warm, late summer heat. He moved with an easy, fluid grace that belied the map of scars on his body. He was hammering the last shingles into place. His back, turned to the sun, was a testament to his journey. The old, puckered star from the soldier's bullet, the long, ropey line from a knife, and the terrible, shredded landscape from Ransom's buckshot, they were all there, silvered by the sun. They were part of him, like the angry, puckered brand over his heart. But they no longer defined him. He was no longer the wounded animal she had hidden. He was just Cain. He looked down, his black hair catching the light. "Evelyn, the last rafter brace." She smiled, wiping a smudge of sweat and sawdust from her forehead. She was not the same woman, either. The haunting fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, deep confidence. She wore her father's denim trousers, not as a necessity, but as a choice. She was a rancher. She and her father secured the rope, and the final heavy beam of pine ascended, swinging into place. They were not just building a barn. They were building a sanctuary. In the new, sprawling corral that stretched out behind it, a dozen horses kicked and played. They were mustangs, wild, thin, and scarred. Animals that Cain had begun to track and bring in. He was not breaking them. Not in the old way. He was gentling them, saving them from the drought and the bounty hunters. Hart's Hollow had become a refuge for the wild drifters of the plains, a place for things that had nowhere else to go. They had been married 3 months after the fire, when Cain was strong enough to stand by the creek without wavering. It had not been in a church. The memory of the ruined chapel at Dry Creek was too sharp, too full of pain and fear. Instead, they had stood on the banks of the small stream that fed the hollow, the water rushing over the clean stones, the willows just beginning to show new leaves. It was a small affair, just as they had wanted. John Hart, his eyes bright with tears he refused to let fall, had stood beside his daughter. He was still thin, but his strength had returned, his spirit as unbending as the mountain rock. He had looked at Cain, this half-Apache man, this ex-outlaw who bore the scars of the world he despised, and he had placed his daughter's hand in his. It was a gesture of trust that healed the last, broken piece of the past. The miners came, their faces scrubbed clean of soot, their Sunday hats held awkwardly in their calloused hands. There had been one other guest. He arrived just as they were speaking their vows, his horse picking its way slowly down the valley trail. Caleb Dunn. He was thinner, his hair almost completely gray. He was not wearing a badge. He had served 6 months in the Tucson prison. His sentence lightened because of his full confession and his actions at the mine. He looked like a man who had wrestled with his own ghost and had made a hard, bitter peace. He did not interrupt. He dismounted and stood at a distance, his hat in his hands, just watching. Afterward, as they shared coffee and fresh bread by the creek, Dunn approached. He did not look at Evelyn. Not at first. He looked at Cain. He was no longer a sheriff looking at an outlaw. He was just one man looking at another. I wanted to give you this," Dunn said, his voice rough. He held out his hand. In his palm was the old, tarnished silver star. "I cannot wear it. I do not have the right. Not after, well, but it ought to belong to an honest man. You too. You are the real law in this territory. You brought the justice." Cain looked at the badge, the symbol of the very system that had hunted him, betrayed him, and left him for dead. He did not move to take it. Evelyn stepped forward, placing her hand on Cain's arm. "We thank you for the thought, Caleb," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But we do not need it. You keep it. Keep it to remember that a man can change his path." Dunn looked at her, his eyes full of a painful gratitude. He nodded slowly, closing his fist around the badge. He had not come for forgiveness. He knew he had not earned it. He had come to pay his respects. He nodded once, turned, and walked back to his horse. The hollow became a different kind of place. It was no longer just a ranch. It was a crossroads. The miners, now working the copper mine as free men in a cooperative partially funded by John Hart, often stopped by, bringing news from Tucson or ore samples for John to inspect. And then, one day, the others came. Evelyn saw them first. 3 small, silent figures on the ridge, watching the ranch, their thin bodies poised to flee. Apache children, their families, remnants of the bands that had been scattered by Thorne's campaigns, still lived in the high rocks, wary and hungry. Evelyn had walked out into the open, her hands empty and open at her sides. She had placed a sack of corn and 2 dried apples on a flat rock, and then she had walked back to the house. The next morning, the food was gone. The day after, they came closer. Now, it was a regular occurrence, almost a ritual. 3 times a week, a small group of them would ride down on their thin, wiry ponies. Evelyn, in the shade of the new porch, taught them. John Hart, who had once held the same harsh prejudices as most white men, would sit with a small boy, patiently showing him how to mend a leather strap. Evelyn sat with 2 young girls, a slate in her lap. She taught them their letters. "A," she would say, her hand over theirs, guiding the chalk. "Apple." Cain taught them something else. He stood with the older boys by the horse corral. He was not teaching them to shoot. He was not teaching them to fight. He was teaching them what his mother had taught him, the things he had tried to forget when he wore the cavalry blue. He was teaching them to listen. "You do not break a horse," he said, his voice low. His hand was on the neck of the wild red mustang, a creature that had, weeks ago, tried to kill him. Now the horse trembled, but it did not flee. Its ear turned, listening to his voice. You listen to him. You hear what he is afraid of. You hear the wind. You hear the rock. You hear the water. You become part of the quiet. Then he is not afraid of you. He becomes part of you. He was reclaiming his heritage, not as a weapon, but as a gift. He was bridging the two worlds that had tried to tear him apart. Evelyn was giving them the tools of the new world that was coming, and he was giving them back the strength of the old one. The sun was a fiery red wafer, balanced on the edge of the western mountains. The last nail was driven. The barn was finished. Cain and Evelyn sat on the edge of the new porch, their legs dangling, their shoulders touching. The high desert air was cooling, turning the sky a deep, bruised purple. John Hart was inside, his pipe lit, the smell of fresh coffee and cherry tobacco drifting through the open door. It was a scent of peace, of home. They sat in that comfortable, easy silence. The silence of two people who have been through the fire and no longer need words to understand one another. He was still scarred. The brand over his heart was a permanent, ugly reminder of a life he had left behind. His shoulder and back, she knew, would ache when the cold rains came. And she was scarred, too, in ways no one could see. The memory of the fire, of her father's gaunt face in the mine, of Tia Rosa's body in the dust, those things were part of her. They were two drifters, two survivors, marked forever by the same violence. She leaned her head on his shoulder. His good one. He smelled of pine sawdust, and sweat, and horse. It was the best smell in the world. "It is good," she whispered, looking at the new barn, its shape a strong, dark silhouette against the twilight. "It is," he said. His arm, the one that had been branded, the one that had held her in the dusty, broken chapel, came around her. He pulled her close. His hand, rough and calloused from the day's work, found hers, his fingers interlaced with her own. This was the promise. It was not a promise of an easy life. The desert was still harsh. The world, beyond their valley, was still full of prejudice and hard men. But it was a promise that they would face it together. Their embrace, there on the porch of the house built from ashes, was a quiet, stubborn testament. It was the proof that love, real and hard-won, could exist between the bullets and the bigotry. It was a home, built for two souls who had, for a lifetime, belonged nowhere at all. Time in the high desert is a patient, relentless thing. It grinds stone into dust and turns the scars of a single, violent night into the foundations of a lifetime. The years turned, season by season, and the sharp, raw edges of what had happened at Heart's Hollow began to smooth. The rain that had quenched the fire had been a baptism, and the land, cleansed, began to thrive. The hollow itself became a place spoken of in low, respectful tones. It was no longer just a ranch. It became a refuge, a sanctuary for the lost, the broken, and the wild, the miners. Free men now, always stopped there, knowing a hot meal and an honest ear awaited them. Drifters, men who had ridden the edges of the law their whole lives, found that the gates were never locked, and the wild mustangs, the ones Cain had saved, ran free in the high pastures, a protected herd that became a living symbol of the valley. The Apache children, who had once come shyly for scraps of food, grew into young men and women. They lived there, in the house built of stone and pine, becoming the children of John Hart as much as Evelyn, and the brothers and sisters of the child that Evelyn and Cain would eventually have. They learned to read from Evelyn's books, And they learned to read the sky from Cain. They moved between the two worlds with an ease that their parents had never known. Their voices a new language, a blend of English practicality and Apache wisdom. The people of the territory, they began to forget the branded outlaw and the girl who had hidden him. Instead, a new story was told, a new legend. They spoke of the horse whisperers of Red Mesa. They said the man, Cain Blackhorse, did not break horses. He spoke to them. They said he could calm the wildest creature with a touch, that he understood the wind. And they said his wife, Evelyn, was the heart of the valley, a woman who could mend a broken bone or a broken spirit with the same steady, gentle hands. Travelers, men who passed through that high, lonely country, would carry the tale. They say that if you camp by the creek at Heart's Hollow when the moon is thin and the wind blows down from the north, the valley is not entirely silent. They say you can still hear the high, wild nickering of the mustangs running free, and sometimes, just sometimes, if you listen hard enough, carried on that same wind, you can hear the faint, distant echo of a soft cry. It is not a cry of fear. It is not the sound of a woman lost in a dark barn, nor the desperate sob of a girl kneeling in the ashes. The old-timers, the ones who knew, they say that cry is the sound of rebirth. It is the sound of the storm breaking. It is the sound of a soul, lost and hunted, finally finding a safe harbor. It is the sound of a heart, locked tight in ice, finally breaking free. The message of Heart's Hollow spread further than any bullet. It was a simple truth, lived out in the stone and pine of that rebuilt house. It proved that love could, indeed, grow in the harshest land. It proved that justice was not always found in a courtroom, but sometimes in the simple, brave act of rebuilding. It showed that forgiveness was not about forgetting a scar, but about touching it with kindness until it no longer hurt. The hollow was a testament that two people, from two worlds, one branded by hate and the other scarred by loss, could forge a bond stronger than any border, any law, or any bloodline. The years were kind. John Hart lived to see his grandchildren, his face a map of peace, and he died in his own bed, looking out the window at the valley he had fought for, the valley he had saved. One winter night, decades after the fire, a storm raged over Red Mesa. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows of the strong house. Inside, the fire roared in the great stone hearth, casting a warm, golden light over the room. Cain Blackhorse, his hair the color of snow, sat in a chair by the fire. He was an old man, his body stiff, his wounds from that night long ago ached with the cold, but his eyes were clear. He watched his wife, Evelyn, her own hair a braid of silver, sat across from him, mending a small saddle. Her hands, though wrinkled, were still steady. She looked up, feeling his gaze, and she smiled. The years had only deepened the lines of kindness in her face. He did not speak. He just reached out, his hand marked with the scars of his life. She placed her hand in his. His thumb brushed her skin. The storm was a distant, angry moan. The fire was a warm, steady heartbeat. They were safe. They were home. He found her in the barn, but what he truly found was himself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, and like this video. It would also help us so much if you hit that hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.